Good evening and welcome. I appreciate everyone coming out this evening, especially on a kind of a cold, blustery night here. My name is Andrew Shapiro. I'm an assistant town manager and director of community and economic development for the town. The first thing I'll just quickly get out of the way is why am I using a microphone in a small room? This is for the benefit of the recording that's going on with NA Cam, so people can watch this later. And so I apologize in advance if it's a little funny that I'm talking into a mic and that our consultants will be talking into a mic as well when they're presenting. And we'll also ask you, I'll toss a mic to you if you want to ask any questions. It's a little bit clunky, but I really appreciate it because that'll ensure that everyone watching on the NACAM recording can pick up all the information that's being discussed. Want to recognize a few people in the room that are here who also work for the town or colleagues of mine who have been involved in this project as well. We've got Amy Maxner, she's our conservation administrator in the conservation department. We've got Jim Stanford, our DPW director. We've got John Borghese, our assistant DPW director and town engineer. And I see that Brian Roach, our chair of the select board, is here as well. Thank you for coming, Brian. I appreciate it. And yeah, again, thank you very much for coming on what's we think is a really important project. Just to kind of lay the groundwork here and a quick introduction before I toss it over to our consultants, Apex. Why are we doing this? You know, what are we looking at here? Well, first of all, the first thing to mention is we are an MVP community, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness. The state has a program that helps cities and towns address basically adapting to and responding to climate change issues. Things like more frequent and heavy rainstorms like the ones we saw back in 2023 here in the summer, drought, heavier winds, and all kinds of issues that have caused cities and towns to rethink how they deal with public infrastructure and natural resources and responding to climate change. And so because we're an MVP community, we have a plan that kind of looks at what our major vulnerabilities are in town, how we want to address those vulnerabilities, and it makes us qualified to seek grants. So we did last year get a grant from MVP to fund this study. And the study really was in response to the general issue of flooding in this area of the Cochichewick River, which for those of you in the room who don't know, basically extends from Lake Cochichewick running down all the way to the Merrimack River. And in between, you've got a series of dams and ponds that were developed over the course of the Industrial Revolution when we had more industry that required those things. And they remain. And we have to look at these structures in these ponds and the lake itself to understand, what are our vulnerabilities with respect to climate change and these more frequent flood events, rain events like the one we had back in 2023. And we engaged Apex, which is an engineering firm that works very frequently with the town. And they're basically, they'll obviously go into a lot of detail on what they looked at, but they're going to provide us an overview of, how, in what respect are we vulnerable to flooding and what we can be doing in the future to maybe better manage these impoundments, the dams that are along the course of the Cochichewick River, because all of these dams are owned by disparate entities. Like the town owns the one that's at Stevens Pond, and you've got Mill Pond, which is owned by RCG. You've got Sutton Pond Condominiums that owns the Osgood Pond Dam, and you've got another private entity that owns the dam down by Sutton Pond. So how do we manage these dam and these structures that are owned by disparate entities? That's one question. But what can we be doing to address being more resilient to flooding with natural solutions, and is there more that needs to be done? So we're fortunate to have Apex. We've got Ryan Paul, Lauren Haugenuzzi, and Maria George from Apex that are going to go through their presentation. I'm going to encourage everybody to ask questions. We can have a discussion. Again, I just want to remind everybody I do need to toss it over with a microphone, so my apologies in advance. But without further ado, I'll toss it over to Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I'm just going to give a quick introduction here, and then I'm going to hand it over to the people who really did the modeling. So I'm Ryan. We have Maria again and Lauren. They're the ones that are going to be talking mostly today. And after this, please, we welcome questions. You'll see that we are still working on the modeling, and we're still working on the solutions. But this is a good time now that we have the model set up to get more feedback from the town in general, and we've already talked to stakeholders, like Andrew said. So this is great, and we got a really good turnout, so I'm excited. And afterwards, we can be around to discuss the boards that we have around here, if you would like to talk about them as well. And now, so I'll just hand it over to Maria. She's going to go through some of the existing conditions.
Thank you, Ryan. All right. Oops, sorry. All right, so today we'll be going over just a little bit of the history of Cochichewick Brook and what existing pieces there are to it. Then we're going to go through just a high-level overview of what we included in our study for the model. And then Lauren will go through the results of the model, and then we'll talk about some potential solutions that we can look at. So to start off, as Andrew was saying, the Cochichewick Brook starts at Lake Cochichewick and discharges to Cochichewick Brook, which flows northwest through North Andover, and then eventually discharges to the Merrimack River. So Lake Cochichewick is the drinking water source for the town, and then as Andrew mentioned as well, there's been a lot of development that has happened around Cochichewick Brook. So being a historic mill town, there's a lot of textile mills that were built directly on top of the brook. Starting in 1830, we had the historic mill district was established. That's the West Mill and East Mill area, and before the mills and dams were put in, this was just a free-flowing river, and then we add dams, and that creates ponds. So we have a couple of dams throughout the river, and other development as well. We built roads, we built residential and commercial areas, and really started to crowd around the river with a lot of built infrastructure. So as you all remember, in 2023, we had a big storm that included on August 8th, there was about 6.2 inches of rain that occurred over a 6-hour period, which is a lot. I'll talk a little bit more about how we talk about different rainstorms, but just as a reference, that's comparable to more than 100-year 6-hour storm. And then just a couple days later, we had another storm event, 1.8 inches that occurred over a 3-hour period. And so with climate change, these kinds of storms are going to become more common and more intense. So knowing that going forward, we need to have a plan to prepare for these storms, which is where the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Action Grant comes in. So the town was able to apply for this grant last year and was awarded it, and this is enabling the town through Apex to be able to study Cochichewick Brook. Excuse me for stumbling that. So we're able to study the Cochichewick Brook system as a whole and look at the different flood vulnerabilities, as well as try to figure out a plan for preparing for future major rainfall events. So this is a figure. I also have over a poster over there if you want to look at it afterwards. This is showing Lake Cochichewick and then the Cochichewick Brook and all of the various structures that are along the brook. This isn't even all of them, but it's the majority of them. So along the brook, we have a couple of dam structures. So those will have ponds immediately behind them. And then we also have several culverts. So culvert is just a word that means a pipe or a small bridge that the stream flows through in order to get under a road or a structure. So about, depending on how you divide and count it, we have about 18 culverts from Lake Cochichewick to Merrimack River and 5 different dams. So I'll just go through the dams. So we have this little reference map up here. So over at the end of Lake Cochichewick, we have the Lake Cochichewick Dam. This was built in 1837, and this is owned and operated by the town. This is used to control the water level in Lake Cochichewick, which again is the drinking water supply. So there's a gate in this gatehouse that can be raised and lowered in order to release water through a culvert in order to so through raising and lowering the gate, they can control the release of water. The gate is for the past almost year has been closed due to the drought conditions that we've been seeing. So very often the gate is entirely closed. Then downstream, so we have Stevens Pond, and then across Stevens Road, we have the Mill Pond Condominium complex, which has a dam that is operated by the town. So there's this grate that's over the dam structure. The town can operate it by adding or removing these wooden boards that can block off flow or open up flow. So again, adding or removing boards can control the amount of water that's in Stevens Pond, which also is sometimes referred to as Mill Pond here. So next, we have going through some wetlands and culverts through Chickering Road, Osgood Road, and then finally in the East Mill District, we have Mill Pond or Machine Shop Pond Dam. So this is one of the older dams built in 1835. So this has a historic museum that you can tour to see the old mill infrastructure. The old intake for the water is over here on the left. So water used to go directly under this building, but then in 2017 there was a failure in the culvert, and this entry had to be abandoned, and then a new intake of water was built to release water from Mill Pond, and this connected into existing culvert that was stable further downstream. Similar to Lake Cochichewick Dam, this also has a gate that can be raised and lowered. So next, just past the West Mill District, we have Osgood Pond Dam. So this was built before 1830, and this is has a concrete structure here, and it has room for wooden boards to be inserted. Again, adding or removing them controls the water level in Osgood Pond. Lastly, we have down near Sutton Pond, there's one last dam on this system. So this dam was built in 1846. It's a concrete structure where you have overflow, and then you also have 3 different openings in the dam. So currently, the bottom opening is blocked off, so water is flowing through the top 2 openings. So that was just a high-level overview of the system. Now I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we looked at when studying this. So like I mentioned before, there's a lot of different ways to choose a storm to model. Terms we use generally are like 100-year storm, 10-year storm. So what that means is a 100-year storm is a storm that is likely to happen about a 1% chance of happening in any given year. So it's a probability thing, but for simplicity, we just refer to it as the 100-year, 50-year event. But with climate change, the frequency of storms is increasing. So we look at both the historic rainfall data, which is, the federal government has this list of total rainfall, varies by location, and that gives us the amount of rain that historically has happened 1% of the time. But with climate change, we're also looking at projected data. So Massachusetts has this tool, Resilient Mass Action Team, and through that, we looked at rainfall amounts that are projected in the year 2070. So this table has a comparison of the different total inches of rainfall that would fall in a 24-hour period. So just to point out the highest one, for the 100-year 24-hour storm, our historic total amount of rainfall would be 7.93 inches. And then looking forward to 2070, that's looking more like 10.8 inches. Sorry, I keep... Okay. Another thing that we looked at was making a model that is realistic to real data. So we put in these data loggers, which are these little things that can record the depth of water over the device. And so it records the depth of water over time. So we put this in several of the ponds throughout the study area. So then we have this depth of water data. And we're able to take that and compare that against the model that we build and figure out things like in dry weather, what is the amount of water that's flowing through the system when there's no rain, so base flow conditions. And then we're also able to look at a storm event that happened in December of 2024. It had 2.44 inches. We're able to look at that storm and model that storm in put that storm into our model and see how that compares. And then we're able to play with some variables in order to make it more realistic. So this is just the calibration step that we went through. So for putting together model, we have first looking at the rainfall runoff. So this is a map of the total area that if rain falls in this area called a watershed, it will make its way into Cochichewick Brook. So if rain were to fall over here, it would make its way directly into Merrimack. It won't go into Cochichewick Brook. So blue is the watershed that contributes to Lake Cochichewick, and then green is the watershed that contributes directly to Cochichewick Brook. Different land use, different types of land use, like whether it's the space is urban and developed, has a lot of pavement, or whether it has forests and lots of plants, that affects how much water runs off of the surface. So land use and slopes and soil types, those are all different pieces of the model that that we use to figure out how much water is entering the brook. And then we use this another tool called HECRAS to model the flow of water through the stream. So we take all that flow data and then we put it in this model. This model is what is used by FEMA in order to develop the floodplain maps that you may have looked at before. This model is, this is just kind of a background skeleton view of the behind the scenes of what goes into the model. So different sections of the brook, we have elevation data, and we're able to send water through and see what happens. So I'm going to hand it off to Lauren now to talk about the model results.
Thanks, Maria. Okay. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about the results. This view is a profile elevation view of the brook. Let me see if I can get this. So up in the top right is the start of Lake Cochichewick in our model. And then we make our way down to the dam, and then all the way down at the bottom left is the Merrimack River. So it's quite a big elevation difference. It's about 100 feet drop from the lake all the way to the river. Another thing I want to point out are just all the structures we talked about. We mentioned the dam. Over here is the mill condo area, and then there's the mill district, and then following is Osgood Dam, and then Sutton down here. Another couple things to note, this is the base flow profile. So this is, like Maria mentioned, it's baseline conditions, no rain is added to the model. This is how it normally looks, or at least this is, we ran flow through this based off of the dam configurations that we observed in the field. So we went out and measured the water elevations and then compared that to our data loggers as well. So this is what it normally looks like. You can see like where the water builds up behind each of the dams, and that's where the ponds are. But I'll click through. So this is showing the peak of the 100-year storm. So again, that's the 1% chance storm. So you'll see that the water levels raise quite significantly. If I point out some of the spots, we got the mill district there that's actually getting overtopped, and then down here by Osgood and Sutton Dam are also getting overtopped. And again, this is the peak of the storm, so this is the highest elevation point. It's not looking like this the entire storm, but it is good to know what the peak will look like. Okay, so now I'm gonna look at a few locations from like a top-down view, just so you can see what actually is getting flooded out during these storms. The Milk Pond condo, we're starting with the 10-year view. First thing we should talk about is, so basically in blue, this is the flood depth. The lighter blue colors are the shallower areas, and the darker blue are deeper. And again, this is showing the peak of the storm. So we'll start with 10-year. It's all within the banks, looking pretty normal. As we move through to the 50-year, some of the areas on the banks are kind of getting flooded out. And then I'll click through to the 100-year, and it further floods out the banks there. I also added the orange outline, which is the 2070 100-year. So you can see there's quite a big difference between the historic 100-year and what we're projecting for the future. So just important to note that as well. And then I'll move to the Mill Pond, or Mills District area. Here's your 10-year. Again, everything's within the banks. Looks pretty normal and okay. And then we'll move through to 50-year. This is the point where the dam does overtop, and you see flooding on the banks, and all in around the buildings, just like we experienced in the August 2023 storm. And then 100-year, the extents get a little bit worse, and then especially with that 2070 storm, you're seeing more flooding there, and then over in this parking lot over there. And we do have a little video, but get this to work. Ooh. See if it works. Thank you. So this will show the 100-year storm over time. So you'll see, at first, you'll see Osgood Pond on the left. You watch that. That starts to back up a bit. It'll take a bit till it gets there. There you go. So it's starting to back up. And then eventually the dam will break. All of a sudden, you get that peak of the storm hits pretty rapidly, and then it'll slowly recede over time. It's just helpful to see like where and when things are backing up. It's important to note that, you know, if Osgood Pond is backing up, that could be a contributing factor. And I'll move on. And then Osgood Pond, here's our 10-year. 50-year looks pretty similar. And then you've got your 100-year. Notably in this area, the banks start to overtop, and also 2070 has flooding in this parking lot. And then Sutton Pond, here's your 10-year storm. There is some flooding in this area. There's low-lying wetlands there, so that makes sense. And then we move to 50-year. The low-lying wetland limits extend a bit, and then you also start to see flooding on the banks by the railroad. None of the culverts have overtopped at this point, but there is some flooding occurring on the banks. And then by the 100-year storm, the Sutton Street culvert does get overtopped, and so does the railroad culvert. So there's a lot more flooding occurring here along the sides here, and then on the road, water spilling into the parking lot, and then getting all around the buildings here. And that's it for the existing condition results, and I'll pass it to Maria to talk about potential solutions.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, so we've covered where the flooding problems are and our general understanding of existing conditions. And so now what can we do about that? So the most immediate thing we can do is look at the dams and figure out how to operate those so that they're all working together. Like Andrew mentioned, some of the dams are privately owned, and so having a plan to coordinate between all 5 of the dams will help us better prepare for a storm. So some things we can control is like adding or removing the boards. If we anticipate a big rainstorm is coming, maybe the timing of when and where to remove boards or lower a gate would allow water to lower in a pond, and that gives you more room to be able to absorb the storm. So if we can, so that's what we'll be looking. We'll be looking at that different variables of like how much to open it, the order of opening it, and the timing, and try to figure out a plan for coordinating between these 5 different structures. So that's something that we have immediate control over. And then there's also things that we can think about for future work. So looking at infrastructure, so things that would actually shovel has to go in the ground. There are other parts of the model that we can look at. With all of the different culverts that we have, we'll be able to look at whether or not, whether there are some areas where water is backing up regardless of what we do with the dam openings. And then we'll be able to say whether or not we need to investigate possibly increasing the size of a culvert, adding a relief line, various options with the built infrastructure. So we like to call that gray infrastructure, which is like concrete stuff that you can put in for general conveyance. Another thing that a lot of towns are looking at is called green infrastructure. So that's adding more green space or removing pavement. The benefits of those options is that if you're able, when rainfall lands on the ground, if you're able to have that be absorbed into the ground where it lands, then less of it is going to make its way to the river. So those are a few different like broad categories that we'll be exploring. So within the next couple of weeks, we'll be taking this model and trying out different configurations. And by the end of June, we're going to have a final plan ready for the town. And that is pretty much it for now. I think that, Andrea, if you wanted, I wasn't sure if there was going to be a follow-up meeting.
Yeah, no. So I think, no, first of all, I just want to thank Apex, Maria, Lauren, Ryan for the great presentation. As Maria mentioned, in terms of next steps, we have to have this project wrapped up by the end of next month to comply with our grant requirements. So there will be forthcoming, wrapping up of this plan. It'll be all documented, all the model results, all the historical information you saw in here, the background information, as well as better outlining some of the potential solutions we can look at, and that'll lay the groundwork for being able to plan for what we want to do as a town in terms of taking action with respect to some of these potential solutions. And just to kind of home in on something Maria was talking about with respect to green infrastructure, the MVP program, this program that funded the grant that allowed us to do this study, they very much stress green infrastructure as a solution. And that is something that when you're applying for an action grant through MVP to implement a green infrastructure solution, that makes you a lot more competitive. So I think it's something we'll be definitely taking another look at. Just one other, piece of information, we'll probably end up having Apex come back to do a final presentation to the select board. So that is something else folks can look at. You'll be, that's a public meeting in and of itself. So certainly the public is welcome to come, or you can watch it on NACAM like you can with any select board meeting. But as far as right now, I would just encourage anybody to ask questions, make comments, give us additional feedback. Happy to do that. And, we'll continue to work on this issue as it's definitely a high priority for the town. I see a question from Peter back here.
Thank you, Andrew. 3 questions. You mentioned and showed us an image of one of the data loggers. How many data loggers did you use and where are they located? My second question is, does your flow model assume all of the culverts are clear of debris? I'm guessing it does. Or does your flow model take into account clogged culverts? And then my third and last question is, will your work going forward include a time factor? So you mentioned that one of the things the town could do is, if a severe storm is forecast, it could lower the water levels ahead of time to prepare to absorb a significant storm. Will your results give the town an estimate of how far in advance they need to start draining? So let's say that there's interest in lowering the lake 4 to 6 inches to get ready, and perhaps different amounts in each of the ponds. How much time is needed to do that, and will you include those calculations? Thank you.
Thank you. I can answer those questions. So first question was about the number and location of data loggers. So we had put out 7 different data loggers. One was in a tributary to Lake Cochichewick. One was in Lake Cochichewick. Then we also had another upstream of the Mill Pond Condominium Dam, one in the Mill Pond Dam, one in Osgood Dam, and one in Sutton Pond. And then we also had a data logger on a drainage outfall that contributed to Sutton Pond. And so those all have been removed. So was that your first 2 questions? And then
Second question was, does your flow model assume all of the
yes.
culverts are clear, or does it take into account jammed culverts?
Yep. So in our model, we have the culverts completely open. We have we recorded the depths, the elevations of the openings in the different culverts. So, for example, like in Chickering Road or Osgood Street culvert, those are rectangular culverts with stream bottom. Their stream sediment will kind of move over time. So we were able to get the elevation of where that is on the current day, and that's included in the model. But yes, all of the all of the other structures throughout the system we visited all of them and modeled them based on how we saw them. And then your last question about timing. So that will be one of the things that we're exploring. So the model that we put together, like Lauren showed in the video, it's a dynamic model that occurs over time, and so that'll be part of what we're exploring is when and in what order to lower the different dams. So yes, that will be an important factor.
I just want to add really quickly just on that issue of coordination, because Maria brought it up in her presentation, and that was part of, I think, Peter's question there as well. There is some level of coordination that currently goes on now. I don't want to speak for DPW. They can go into more detail, but I know that they actively communicate with RCG, the owners of the mill area property that controls the East Mill Pond Dam. And so when there's a storm event coming, I know there's some level of communication that goes on between the water department that controls the level of Lake Cochichewick, and I know that RCG communicates with the town when they're lowering their gate to release some flow from East Mill Pond. And then in addition to that, in order to do some emergency work, I know the Sutton Pond condominium owners who own the Osgood Pond Dam, they removed a board from their dam, and so that has lowered the level of their pond, the Osgood Pond. And the owner of Sutton Pond is actively exploring whether or not they should be also removing a board as well that could lower the level of their pond. So there's been some active discussions, and there already is some active work being done on basically dynamic management when storm events are coming through. Now we need to be more comprehensive about it, and that's why this study is important, and that's why the communication with our stakeholders is important. But just wanted to give folks a little bit of assurance that a lot of that is already happening as we speak. So.
Can you go back to the slide where you showed the actual watersheds? That doesn't at all take into account the water that comes down Sutton Street. In a large rainstorm, it comes down Sutton Street this deep. It doesn't show that at all on your map. No, Sutton Street comes down into the end of the brook.
That's right.
Yeah. That water all comes down into that culvert.
Yep.
Flood anything, it's at the last point, goes into right by North Main Street.
So in putting together this, the limits of what contributes, we looked at both the elevations of the elevations for like the grade of what actually makes its way into the culvert. We also looked at the town's drainage system. There is another stream right here that also takes in water around this area. So it's possible that might be what you're thinking of, but we can also double.
Further down, that's why we get that big puddle right where the culvert is, because it comes down the street.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is great. This is the information that we need, because we don't have all the first-person accounts of what's happening. So I think we'll take a look at it and see if that contributes. We'll talk to the DPW to see if they have any more information on it as well. But yeah, any feedback like this is great. This is exactly what we're looking for to improve our model, right? So if there is more water coming down, we basically set this up looking at the information we had available to us. But the first person accounts, you can't beat that, right? So that's where you all come into play. So I think this is all great, and we'll definitely take a look at it.
So, two questions. The first one is, can you explain the outflow into Merrimack River? Does that contribute to any of the backing up? Because right behind the Sutton Dam, there seems to be quite a gorge. So what does that contribute, that culvert that goes into Merrimack River? What's the reason for it?
Thank you. So just to go over what the pieces are. So we have the dam is located here, and then there's an open channel section that bends parallel with the road, and then there is a culvert that goes under Sutton Street. And then we have another open channel section before it's piped for a couple hundred feet, starting at the railroad all the way to Merrimack River. I'm sorry, I think today.
Why is it enclosed, and does Merrimack River cause a backup?
Mm-hmm. So the question was, why is it enclosed, and does Merrimack River cause a backup? So there's been a lot of development over here. Originally, I don't remember the date, but originally it was just culverted here just for the railroad, and then the rest of it got buried up to the river in the past, like, mid 1900s. And so we have this section that's entirely buried. Let me go to the actual elevations. Okay. So here's the dam, and then the road, and then this rectangle here is the start of the culvert from the railroad up to Merrimack. So there is a decent drop from the outfall pipe to the actual river. There's a fair amount of elevation. I think that's about we're at elevation 40 here, and then down here we're at elevation 5. So there is a fair amount of elevation gain where that kind of frees things up. And your question about whether the Merrimack River has an impact, yes, but it has a delayed impact. So we looked at the water levels in Merrimack, and it takes about 3 days from a storm for the Merrimack River to have its peak water level. It's just a very large watershed, so it takes a lot more time for water to move through that whole watershed in order for all of the rainwater to actually reach its highest point in the river. So at least for the peak water level within our study area, it doesn't have an immediate effect because of that delay.
Can I ask a follow-on to that? So is that saying that basically by the time the water level peaks in the Merrimack, a storm event in North Andover, for instance, presumably is well over with, so storm water has receded essentially here and is not causing an exacerbation of flooding in the immediate area as a result of the river being higher?
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair to say. And I just want to add to Maria's comment that we're studying the flood waters in the brook itself. We're not studying the water levels in the Merrimack. So that's a separate system altogether. So there is flooding in that whole area beyond the railroad tracks from the river rise in a large storm that we're modeling here. We're not showing that flooding in this model, but there is flooding in that area. It's just a completely separate system. And FEMA models these things the same way. They model them as separate systems like this. Like Maria said, you don't really see the reaction to the Merrimack for a few days after. So by the time this water flushes out, you don't It's not going to impact the upland areas.
So would it be possible at one point in the future to bring that so there's not a drop? That's another question, just with regards to wildlife.
Oh, with regards to wildlife, to basically modify that area so there's no drop. That pipe is not dropped. You're still going to have some kind of elevation drop to the Merrimack somehow, but of course you can look at options to do separate things. It's just we would need to look at that area, I would say, in more detail to see what can be done as far as soft solutions and maybe daylighting pipes rather than having it completely underground. So that goes back to like the green infrastructure and the soft solutions that we are going to recommend. So the outcome of this study in the end is what you're going to see on those levels. It's going to be recommending certain areas for future studies, maybe using the MVP grant again or other grant opportunities to study these specific areas to say, like, this is a target area we might want to look at for green infrastructure, or to open up a pipe or something to that degree, or it's removing a dam or doing all these different types of things. So the immediate study will be focused on what we can do now and providing detailed information on what we can do to modify the system with the controls that we have. You're welcome.
Other questions, comments?
Hi, John Thompson from Sutton Pond and former member of the Public Works Board. Have you considered storm drain, for the difference in speed from stormwater and surcharging storm drains and so forth? I think that's one of the things below South Main Street. Once that gets into that culvert, the flood there is a surcharge from the sewers. It just surcharges up. Also, the turbidity coming down this whole thing is ridiculous. I mean, the poor turtles in which pond do we have here? Osgood Pond are wearing goggles. I mean, it's ridiculous. But we love our pond. We've got 2 swans, a pair of Canadian geese and so forth, and it's a thing of nature. But we're also concerned, we have 188 units there, and we're usually on fixed income, and the state has found a great engineering company that comes in and took all the wood out of our dam and has dropped it 2 feet. And we have no say. We don't know what they're doing. They cut all the trees down, even though we were told we couldn't cut anything along the edge. Now they're talking about grinding the stumps. I mean, it's getting ridiculous. No, I don't see. If you want to kill a tree, put some copper nails in it. So there's got to be a feasibility study to this, because we're really getting beaten up by this. And we love the place. And the other part, and I'm not casting any doubts on anybody, but there was a big problem in that storm, and it was held up by the Davison firm of U-shaped mills to the point of 4 to 5 feet of water built up behind there. All right, cars were flooded out behind it. Fire department found out about it, came in, broke windows to flood it. When it came right through that mill, we got flooded. It took us about half an hour for it to come up 4 feet, go over the dam, go over the road, create some erosion, and then probably within an hour, it was back down. So that isn't directly part of what happened. That's a side, and that's exactly why we need all this control. Because without a sequence of events, we're talking a dead body in between. And this is where the biggest problem is.
Again, a lot of the water that went down there was a lot of water coming down Elm Street that day. And there's videos of the stairs at the top of the hill of the mill complex where the water was surging down from Elm Street. And it's a straight drop. It's just a big hill that's been paved over. You got to take some of that into account too, the runoff from above.
All the storm drains were surcharged.
Yeah,
Prescott Street and down,
none of the storm drains could handle it.
Yeah, so a lot of good questions. So starting at the beginning, you asked about the drains and how that's accounted for. So this is, there are different levels of complexity and detail within different models. Within this one, we are studying the whole system, and we had to take a few steps to simplify it. So in this model, we aren't modeling all of the different pipes and drains throughout the entire city. If there's specific locations that we find that we want to look at in more detail, we'll be able to look at that with a more detailed study and modeling all those pipes. That said, we do have factors of safety, looking into how much water is moving through the system. Your second question about turbidity. There's a lot of different factors there. Some of that is the whole watershed, what sort of soft solutions and green infrastructure is in place in order to prevent soil from washing into the stream. There's already throughout the town, there a lot of catch basins are what's called deep sump, that prevents, it's like this kind of basin that allows tries to hold back the turbidity from moving downstream. So there are some pieces of that in town, and also some room to improve there. And then another big factor with turbidity is how fast the water is moving. And so there's a lot of different variables there, but one is if we're able to hold back water in a dam, we're able to slow it down, and possibly look at controlling the release of that. So if we're able to make the water move slower, that can help. But turbidity in general, that's like an infrastructure-wide thing. As for your question about the development over here with the trees being cut down, I'm not sure if Andrew, if you want to weigh in on that.
I don't know, Amy, not to put you on the spot, but I know that that was probably something that came out of the report from the state on the basically the condition of the dam at Osgood Pond, and so it was basically part of an order from the state, and so it was something that came out of that report, and it was done with also supporting guidance from the Conservation Commission, oversight from the Conservation Commission. So again, those are mitigation. I agree with you, ma'am, when saying it doesn't sound like a green solution. I would tend to agree, but at the same time, there are factors that make the the situation with respect to the condition of the dam worse or better, and tree roots and vegetative species contribute to the degradation of the dam and the shoreline sometimes. And so Amy looks like she can speak more to it than I can, but hold on one sec.
I think it's important to understand when you think about a dam, especially the Osgood Pond Dam, you have the outflow structure where the water goes, but the road that is supported by the earthen berm is actually part of the dam itself. So ODS, Office of Dam Safety, inspected that, and they don't like to see trees growing on an earthen berm dam because tree roots impact the stability and the integrity of that. So the first phase was we need to cut the trees down, and then the second phase is a more in-depth investigation of the condition of the dam, the earthen berm dam, and is there any impacts from the vegetation. And what they ultimately like to see, Office of Dam Safety, they like to see a nice mowed slope on those types of dams. So that's, and I'm not a dam expert, but that's what I understand from coming out of Office of Dam Safety anyway.
Yeah, the engineers are hired to communicate with dam safety, and we're the last people to find out about it, except for when the bill comes in.
And I'll just quickly also mention, this is a little bit tangential to all this, but I think it's important to let folks know that in terms of the amount of work and study and examination that's going on in this process. So you mentioned, looking at a feasibility study of your dam, kind of understanding it better. Well, we did do a feasibility study for Sutton Pond, and this feasibility study was specifically related to looking at what would it entail to actually remove the dam altogether down at Sutton Pond. And we applied for a grant to do the same thing at Osgood Pond. Unfortunately, we weren't successful in getting that grant. But we don't ultimately know if it's a good solution to remove the dam altogether, but it is good information to understand what would be required in order to do it, and whether or not it is in fact feasible to do. And at the very least, in the case of Sutton Pond, examining whether it makes sense to even just remove a board similar to what Osgood Pond did, so you can create more storage in that particular pond. So you may not have to take the dam out altogether. You can get part of the way there by creating more stormwater storage by removing boards. So it's just all to say that there is a lot of investigation, into these individual dams as well, in addition to this larger study that we're doing now. And to Ryan's earlier point, there may be further studies to come. I mean, I know it's kind of nauseating to think that you're just always doing these studies and these examinations, but it really is that big of an issue. But if it's me personally, I would love to see an opportunity to continue to implement some strategies, and the nearer term things are going to be things like better coordination between the town and other owners of dams on the actual management of the structures themselves.
What would be the point of removing the Sutton Street Dam?
I'll just speak as to the reason why we looked at it. When that large event happened a couple years ago, the water was really, I don't want to say the dam itself was actually breached, but the water level was extremely high, very much threatening the integrity of Sutton Street itself. And so when you think about a structure like this, it was put in during obviously like the Industrial Revolution, or a time period when you needed these structures to help run the mill industries, essentially. So it's an unnatural addition to the ecosystem here. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, does it make sense to return the river to its natural state? And also, as was shown in an earlier photo or map, the channel takes a hard turn, a 90-degree turn, which is also sort of an unnatural thing for the water to be doing, and could be contributing to how heavy the flow is there. So I'm speaking as a non-engineer on this issue, but we were really concerned about how high the water level got when the flooding event happened in 2023, and also the fact that that dam too is also I forget what the exact designation is, but the state's Office of Dam Safety has flagged this dam for needing to have issues addressed. So given that status, we wanted to look to see, okay, does it make sense to remove the dam so we can create more capacity to let water flow through this area and relieve some of the pressure that's built up along the Cochichewick River.
I don't see how that would when it's a, 25, 30 drop?
but all of that rose up to the top when we had a major storm event. So it doesn't matter how much of a drop, it got so high and it really threatened Sutton Street. And so, all right, well, I saw it with my own eyes, but Jim saw it as well, I think.
Does anybody know from this model or previous models how Cochichewick River flowed from pre-industrial times, pre-mill times, from the very start at Cochichewick Lake? Is it known what the bed was, what the riverbed was?
So that's a good question. That wasn't part of this study. We were looking at studying what the existing conditions and infrastructure was, but this is a map from the 1930s, and so I haven't dug into this, but that's a good question about what it looked like before. But from this map, it's just a stream without any ponds throughout it. So that's one piece of information.
So can you tell from your models how quickly that would flow in a fairly heavy rainstorm? How the flow would be through a natural river?
In theory, yes, but that would be an entirely different model. That would be a whole bunch of different conditions that different elevations. There's been so much that's been changed over time that I wouldn't be able to really comment on that too much.
Thank you.
And I'll just quickly say, I don't know what the pre-industrial, configuration of the river is either, but I just know that if you take a look at, when we did the study of Sutton Pond, again, you see that sort of hard 90-degree angle turn, which doesn't seem like a natural feature of what a typical river would do. So there's good speculation to say it was more of a straighter configuration, which is what the study says could be contemplated if we were to remove that dam. You could, just straighten the flow. You could straighten the channel in that location so it didn't wind as hard.
There was another pond across the street.
Oh, interesting.
There was a culvert to the other pond that was actually powered the Sutton Mill.
Okay, so this woman is saying that there was a pond across the street as well. So that's an interesting thing to contemplate as well. And it just shows you that, because all of the area across the street, now it's all asphalt and it's all building, it's all asphalt. So, obviously that contributes to flow as well. Other questions, comments? These are all great questions, by the way, and really good feedback too. I'll quickly mention, in case anybody thinks of any last minute questions, but before we go, I'll quickly mention, so we have a website up on the town's larger website. I'm sorry I don't have the address up here, but you can either send me a note. Again, my name is Andrew Shapiro, ashapiro@northandoverma.gov, or you can just go to the town's website, and basically all you do is you go to the Conservation Department's website webpage, and you go kind of low on, you scroll down the links on the left side, and there is a link that takes you to some issues related to examining flood issues. And there's a couple links there, and one of them is about this study. So it is linked on the town's website. And it was also linked on the flyers that went out and the information that went out on the town's social media or emails if you received those. Yeah. Well, I just want to thank our consultants again, Apex. Really appreciate all the hard work they put in on developing the models and providing all the background information. I want to thank our staff at the town who work with me on this as well, and I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. We're always available, town, myself, DPW, conservation. If you have any questions, follow-up questions, we're happy to talk to you. And again, this should be done next month, and we'll be doing presumably a presentation to the select board to just sort of go over the final results. And this will be a continuing process, because then there's going to be, like we've said, there might be additional studies that come out of this, and there certainly, hopefully, will be some projects that come out of this, and we'll make the public aware of that. There was a question about if abutters get notice. So, you know, it's hard to encapsulate who qualifies as an abutter in this kind of amorphous sort of area. So we're just doing our best to get the word out there. We go on social media, we send out notifications. And actually, I want to also recognize Groundwork Lawrence, some folks in the back that are here with us tonight as well. Groundwork Lawrence, we brought them in because people may not know this, but two major blocks of area at the lower end of the Cochichewick River are environmental justice communities. So we wanted to take the extra step of engaging Groundwork Lawrence, that does a great job of doing community outreach on all kinds of projects. And yes, they're called Groundwork Lawrence, but they do work in Methuen, they do work in Haverhill, all around the Merrimack Valley. So they're our neighbors in Lawrence, and we wanted to engage them on this. So we had them go out and do some door knocking. So if anybody in here is here because of that, that shows you that they were effective. But even if no one's here from the door knocking, those people are now aware this is a project, and they can reach out to us to ask questions. So we did a little extra engagement on this, and we're very aware that, you know, we want to get the word out. So, but thank you for the question. I think that wraps it up. Thanks everybody. I appreciate your time. Take care.